This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello, Cardinal fans, and welcome to another episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. This is your host, Christian May-Suzuki, and in this episode, unfortunately, I think we're being faced with a grim reality here. The St. Louis Cardinals, as middling as they are this season, aren't going to do anything at the trade deadline, or at least anything massive. They got one guy, a very low-level prospect at the moment, and I think that's what we're going to end off with. I think all indications seem to point towards management accepting that this team isn't very good and just packing it in and seeing what happens. I get this impression because while Mozeliak says that he is going to reach out to people and express their interest, with Katie Wu is saying that no one is really expecting the Cardinals to make any big trades, it's pretty hard for me to believe that Mozeliak is going to do much at this point. It's been a lot of either really big trades or really small trades that the Cardinals have made. There's not a lot of in-between, and there hasn't been a lot of mid-season stuff either. So it doesn't seem like it's in the character of the team to make any big moves right now, which is a shame. I really do think that there's a lot of opportunity for the Cardinals to turn some prospects into some young talent, young major league talent, and fill some very important needs. And that's not what's happening, unfortunately. They're sort of sticking it out. They realize that this is a close to 500 or 500 team, and we're just going to ride it out and see. So, with that being said, as we look forward to the rest of the year, I think one of the issues that goes beyond just the personnel itself is the way the lineup has been constructed. There's been a lot of interesting decisions, a lot of either stubbornness or just a need to try things that aren't necessarily needed from Shildt. And while that was more at the beginning of the season and things have solidified in the lineup a little bit more, there are certain things that probably could be done, could be optimized just based on numbers and just the way that people have looked this year. And there's obviously a couple ways that you can do it. It sort of depends, again, on the philosophy. You have the philosophy where you put your Goldschmidt, Nolan, Arenado core at 2 and 3, and then there's the school of thought where you keep them in the more traditional 3 and 4. So I was normally, or at first was, of the mindset that a 2-3 would be good because we don't even have a leadoff hitter, much less a decent number 2 guy. So I think that putting those guys at the top, or getting them as close to the top as possible, it's not necessarily just for at-bats, but I think that you have the one guy who is best at getting on base and who is the most confident hitter, and then you put your best hitter that can drive him in front. And part of the reason that was a thing was because the number 1 hitter, the leadoff guy, was Edman. Now, unfortunately, with the season panning out and us seeing him over a larger sample size, Edman is in a weird spot. He doesn't necessarily hit well enough to be a 2-hitter, doesn't draw walks enough or really get on enough to be an ideal 1-hitter, doesn't have the pop to sit in the core of the lineup, and yet isn't necessarily a bad enough hitter that you want to stick him in the back of the lineup at an 8 spot. So what do? Well, you could put him down in the 7 spot. You could put him in the 8 spot. But I think that while he does struggle a lot, he has done enough and he has shown enough, especially when it comes to speed, where you can put him in the 2 spot. The idea here is the faster the second guy is, the harder it is to turn a double play. I think a lot of people focus on the guy going from first to second, but because there's such a little time in between fielding the ball and getting to second, I honestly think that you have a better chance of success in terms of saving a double play if you have the faster guy in the second spot and you have then your core in front of that. If they throw out the lead runner at second, then that is what it is. But generally speaking, if a play is going to happen, it's either going to be a double play because the ball is hit hard enough where it's no matter how fast the guy is at second, it doesn't make that much of a difference, or both guys are going to be safe because the ball wasn't hit hard enough and it was a situation where they weren't able to get to the ball in time and it gave enough time for the guy to get to second. There isn't really a time where you see the guy at second save, but the guy at first thrown out. And that's why, at this point, I think putting Edman at 2, one of the faster guys, and not the fastest, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And he's also a guy who, not an ideal leadoff hitter, not the best, but in terms of what the Cardinals have, he is probably the best prototype for a 1 or 2 a top of the lineup hitter, and a guy that you want to try and score ahead of our best hitters. So I think that at this moment in time, you put Dylan Carlson, who has an OBP of 336, is basically the best on the team, and at leadoff, because at the end of the day, the best OBP is the best OBP. He's a very solid hitter, and there's enough power in the core right now, as we'll get to later, where it's more about getting the guys in front on. So at the end of the day, you'd rather see Carlson at 2, you'd rather see Carlson at 5 or 6, or even at 4 if he's really getting there. But with the way that this team is built, that's not sustainable. So with Carlson at 1, you put Edman at 2, again, in part because he doesn't quite fit anywhere else, especially on this team. And then your 3, 4, and 5 are sort of grouped together, and they're sort of they sort of coexist with each other in a way. The Goldschmidt, Arenado, O'Neill structure is a lot about protection, a lot about who deserves to be protected and who can protect the best. Now, before Goldschmidt's big coming out party this year, I was of the impression that you should definitely be putting Arenado ahead of Goldschmidt as opposed to the other way around. But with the way that he's been hitting, it's okay to keep Goldschmidt at 3 for sure. Having a guy with a sub 700 OPS at the third spot is obviously not ideal, but it's not something that's exactly worth protecting. But now it's obviously he's a threat. He's been seeing the ball well, not as good as you would hope, not as good as he was in Arizona, but he's seeing the ball well. And he's a guy who's been productive enough where you can put Arenado behind him and still it's still okay. It's still someone they have to think about. And that especially applies as well to Arenado and having O'Neill behind him. It was tough before with, especially with O'Neill hurt and then with him struggling a little bit for the Cardinals to have that number 5 hitter and that solidified core. But with the way that he has emerged, with the way that the two guys, Goldschmidt and Arenado, have been playing, I think that you have a core. You have a core for a decent portion of time, I think. However long you can keep those two guys together, I think O'Neill can be that 5-slot hitter, and especially if he continues to improve, he continues to see the ball a little bit better and can maybe bump up his walk rate a little bit. I still think he's got plenty of ways to go. I think he's got a great build for baseball, and he's got great speed, great strength. there's not a lot of things that he's missing from a body standpoint. So it's not necessarily sky's the limit for him. There are certain things that you can't quite develop. He's never going to have the eye of Juan Soto or anything like that. But he's certainly got room to improve, and he's got room to get better. And he can definitely become one of the better outfielders in the league. And probably he has that opportunity with the speed that he has to become the best power corner in the MLB for a significant period of time. And that might seem like a radical statement, but at the end of the day, he has the speed, he's got the power, and right now he's building up the ability to hit the ball. So, there are obviously a lot of great guys out there who are power corners, but who knows? Who knows? We could see great things from O'Neill. I've been very, very high on him for a long time, and it's great to see that he's finally coming out. Now, obviously, it'd be nice to have Marco Gonzalez right now. I know he hasn't played particularly well in Seattle, but any starter at this point would be great. That's beside the point. Anyway, so the 6 hitter, this is maybe the more controversial spot in the list, because there's one guy who's been a mainstay in this spot for a long time, and it's time for that to end. I think at this point it would be good for the 6 hitter to be Harrison Bader. Harrison Bader has been arguably the biggest positive on the season, and some new reports that have come out indicate that it's not just a flash in the frying pan. It's not just a fluke. It might actually be Harrison Bader turning the corner, and here's why. So there's a story that came out recently on Bader, and it essentially goes into some of the details regarding a surgery that he went through during the offseason. And this surgery was very interesting because, according to the story, Bader was hit with or was hampered by congestion and watery eyes and allergies. The reason that this is interesting is obviously that kind of thing would have an issue, make it harder to see the ball, would impact your vision. And it was caused by gigantic polyps. According to Bader, his left side of his nose was 95% congested and the right side was 90% congested. So after he got these removed, he doesn't have any more issues with allergies and nasal congestion. He's able to sleep better. He says he's able to recall his dreams for the first time in years. He's able to actually get into that REM sleep and actually get that rest and refreshment that the body needs. He now apparently doesn't have any more issues with seeing the ball, especially in the summer heat or in times where his allergies are really going crazy. That is a major development in a player, and it's kind of shown. He's seen the breaking balls that he could never see, those sliders. He's suddenly seeing them much better than he once was, and that is a very, very important step for the Cardinals to take, and it's something that should be rewarded. And at the end of the day, with the way that Yadier has hit this year, and I'll talk about him in just a second, and the way that Bader has, number-wise, probably been one of the best hitters on the team, I think that you got to reward that, and you got to put him in that position where, again, he's got good power, he's hitting the ball well, and he's got good speed. When you're looking at guys who are trying to score, you could argue that Bader could be put at the 2 spot, but he's seen so much success deeper in the lineup. It's one of those things where your circumstances change, the situations change, and the pressure changes. So you don't want to disturb that approach too much. You don't want to bury him at the bottom of the lineup because he's comfortable there. But you also want to, again, as I say a lot of times, put him in a position where he will succeed, where he will have the best chance to succeed. And I think that you put him in a spot where there's not too much pressure. He can continue to work on his craft, do what he does, and get comfortable. But he's also in a position where he's right behind O'Neill, right behind Arenado, and he can drive those guys in when they get on. He can make that impact for the guys in the middle. And him doing that's kind of something what we need right now. Now, moving to 7, you have Yadier Molina, I think. And let's face it, he just hasn't hit well this year. He has not. It's been a struggle, and we've seen a lot of plays where normally he would be active on his feet. He would be getting up behind the plate and moving to make blocks, reacting quickly to errant throws. And you can just tell this year that he's a step slow. There's plays where it's a pass ball that he just has to stick his glove out and could, easily get normally. And he just simply doesn't make the effort, doesn't really move his body, simply just sticks his arm out and just misses it. And look, this isn't hate. This isn't trying to talk trash. This isn't complaining. This is simply an observation. This is what we see. At the end of the day, it's nothing to be embarrassed about to get older and to lose a step physically, because that's something that happens to everyone. And I get that he prides himself on conditioning and prides himself on his physical form. But at the end of the day, what he's done at catcher is essentially unchallenged and unsurpassed by 99% of baseball players. The wear and tear that comes with playing catcher, it's forced a lot of players out of that position. And it's a position that requires a lot of fortitude and a lot of body, like endurance from your body, not just from your mind, but from your body itself. And it's going to wear down, and at the end of the day, that's what's happened to Yadi. He has worn down. It's time, and it's not hate. It really isn't. It is just facing the facts, unfortunately. And you know what? He has done great for us, and if he wants to stay another year and stay on as a mentor, then that would be wonderful for Kninsner. But Yadi should be done as a starter after this year. It's time to let the younger guys really come in, and it would be great for him to serve as a mentor to those guys and over a full season of them starting, to go through the ups and the downs, go through working on calling pitches and working with pitchers,